Welcome to Mind and Soul Matters. We're delighted to share with you again another special presentation from a live forum. It is part of a series of live talks organised in collaboration between Mind and Soul Matters and Melville Baha'i Community to discuss issues around mental health in our society. I will leave the introduction of our presenter to Dr. Dina Ashurian, MC of the forum.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina, and I'll be the MC for this afternoon's program. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Noongar land today, and to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land and to the elders, past and present, and to pay my respects to their culture. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of background on family and domestic violence. Domestic violence remains a significant and deeply concerning issue in Australia, affecting individuals from all ages, genders, and cultural backgrounds. It encompasses physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, and financial abuse. Domestic violence not only causes an incredible amount of personal trauma, but also has wide-ranging social and economical impacts, contributing to homelessness, mental health issues, and places a heavy burden on the health and justice systems. This complex issue requires a coordinated, whole-of-community response that includes education, early intervention, accessible support services, and sustained government commitment to prevention and justice reform. I'd like to share a personal anecdote. As many of you know, these forums take months to organize. And whilst we were in the planning stages for this particular one, I was called to jury duty. And it so happened to be a case involving domestic violence. The synchronicity was striking. It was almost as if it was validating the importance of this event and to help me understand it better than just simply researching the topic. Serving as a juror on this case gave me a powerful and personal insight into the devastating impact that this abuse can have on both the partner and the children involved. While I was aware of domestic violence as a significant issue, hearing firsthand accounts and seeing the emotional toll it took on the family brought a whole new level of understanding and empathy for me. It revealed the complexity of these situations, the fear, the silence, the lasting trauma, and how it affects every aspect of a victim's life. This experience has shifted my perspective and deepened my commitment to supporting efforts to educate the community about the impact and resources available to those affected. Our final speaker is Wendy Evans. Wendy is a proud mother, a resilient professional, and passionate advocate who brings grit, grace, and lived experience as a survivor of domestic and family violence. She believes in the power of the village to support survivors, to rebuild their lives, and to guide the next generation away from the harm and toward empathy. As a member of the Lived Experience Advisory Group, Wendy provides strategic advice to the Minister for Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence, helping to shape more compassionate systems for all those impacted by violence. Wendy also speaks to the vital role the village plays in shaping the future, not only by supporting survivors, but by reaching the next generation with compassion, guidance, and accountability. She believes in teaching young people, especially those at risk of causing harm, that violence is never the answer, and that there are better, kinder ways to relate, to cope, and to grow. So please welcome Wendy to the podium.
Now, where do I start? I wrote, I rewrote, and I rewrote stories, and I have nothing with me today. I suppose I'll start from when I was a small child and imagine a 3-year-old listening to her mother being violated by her father, not knowing that's what it was, but at some level feeling it was wrong. As a 3-year-old, we talked about the importance of the family structure And even as a 3-year-old, before I've been trained in what was good, bad, or evil, I somehow knew something was wrong. And it was years later, after my father had passed, that I asked my mother about this memory because, quite frankly, I thought, well, maybe they were in the bedroom doing something else. Maybe that's what it was. And my mother, to my surprise, was nearly horrified that I had remembered that instant. And the story that I'm going to share is of a 3-year-old walking into a bedroom with a wooden spoon, because that was quite commonplace type of discipline when I was a child, to get a small smack on the bottom with a wooden spoon. So as a 3-year-old, when I could hear my father doing the wrong thing, I instinctively got my mother's wooden spoon out of her drawer and trotted into their bedroom and hit him with it. Now, that was the last of my memory, and I can remember everything in the bedroom. I can't remember what happened after that. It's just little fragments. Which brings me to the children. The children always remember, no matter what age they are, and how that impacts you. Now, for me, I thought I was smart. I was never going to be impacted. I knew what domestic violence was. I was all over it like a rash. I'd grown up with it. I'd grown up with the coercive control, the financial abuse. My mother couldn't even dress in blue because my father did not like that colour. She would get me to cook meals on her behalf that she wanted to cook because I was allowed to get away with such behaviour, but she was not. It would be picked up and thrown against the wall. And then as a child, I was taught to be the glue between my parents, which actually put a lot of space between my mother and my father because I saw her as a weak individual. And so I never sought any solace in my mother's at all. So that was sort of lost time, if you like, that had to be made up in adulthood, which is very difficult to do once you haven't grown up with the closeness of a parent. And that sort of propels me to now. Years and years later, as a 19-year-old, I had left home at 16 because of the domestic violence and made a stance. I had put myself through university by myself and been pretty much no contact with the family because of the control that my mother was enduring. And then I met my partner and I thought he was lovely. He was so attentive and he listened to me. He thought I was intelligent. He validated all the things that wasn't validated as a child. I was a prime target for someone to use that type of control. Did I realise it at the time? Yeah, there was some red flags. There were definitely some red flags. But I'm like, oh, it's just his mental health. It's okay that he punches holes in walls. It's okay that he punches the car. It's even okay that he threw a slipper at me because I left them in the middle of the hallway. I'm terribly untidy. And he was very tidy. So I always minimised his behaviours because he didn't hit me, right? Because that's what I'd been taught domestic violence was, that was just hitting. That was to come when he couldn't control me later in the relationship. So 13 years later, we separated. There was a case of strangulation. There was a case of holding down. There was a case of bruises, many, many holes in walls, and proactive anger. He used a lot of that because in retrospect, he always punched something that he could put his fist through. So in Tasmania, that was a wall because it was just plaster. In Western Australia, it was always a door because, again, you don't hurt yourself when you punch a door. And being an emergency nurse, I'd seen plenty of people punch things and dislocate their thumbs because they, out of just pure rage, hit something without even thinking about it. And then that takes me to the family courts. They'll protect me. That's what I thought. The family court can only do so much, and restraining orders can only do so much. But a village validates your experience. And it supports you to believe in yourself again, because I cannot tell you how many times that I've spoken to people looking for validation that it really did happen that way and it wasn't something that I did or didn't do. And I can't tell you, if there is something that you can do, is just listen. Don't offer advice. Why don't you leave? How could have you let that happen? One that I get quite common now is because most people think that I'm quite outspoken, I'm strong, I do what I like. How could I have possibly been that victim of family and domestic violence? Well, I grew up not understanding good, healthy boundaries. So when we talk about family, I had no idea what healthy boundaries were. So how was I going to set them when I seen someone doing poor behaviour? I did exactly what my mother had done, even though I thought I was smarter than her and that I would never do that. I gave my power away every single time in the relationship. And it wasn't until I stood up, and it still is happening to a certain degree today. I'm still stalked. That's unfortunate, but it is just what it is. It seems pretty benign. It's at a distance, but nevertheless, I'll probably be watched for a very long time, and along with my children and the subsequent children that he has also gone on to have with another relationship, which is now 4 years into family court and $500,000 in, and they still have not solved their children problems and their assets. So it kind of shows you the cycle of where a perpetrator's at as well. So we have to feel for them in this as well. It's very important because that's where the village can make a difference in not enabling these behaviours. When someone talks about not wanting to pay child support or they don't want to separate the finances in certain financial splits, at the end of the day, if there are children involved, they are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. Whether it's 60%, 40%, 30%, 70%, it actually makes no difference at the end of the day to the children. They will be fine if the conflict is reduced as much as you possibly can. And that's not saying don't go and do what you believe is right, but keep it in mind that sometimes that's a commercial, you've got to make a commercial decision sometimes and put a line in the sand. And I was glad that I did that. Did it mean that I was financially behind? Sure. When I left, I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have a bank account. My name had never been on a house. We'd owned 10 houses and my name had been on none. I didn't recognise that at the time as financial abuse. I walked out with no money other than I did take a bit of money out of his visa, which he was most upset about. But I didn't even have a bank account. And I felt in some way that I was doing the wrong thing by him because, I made my bed. I have to lay in it, right? I made these promises to care for this man and support him through all of his mental illnesses, only to really find out that, sure, he's got mental illnesses, but he also has a really unhealthy relationship with power. Power over is the only way he understands to survive in this world. And what a different man he may have been if his family structure at some point had pulled that back and said, that's not okay, that's not how we treat people. So it starts with our children. And I'm glad to say that to this point, my now 20-year-old, 28-year-old and 26-year-old, I think they know what type of banshee I could become if I felt that they would show those same behaviours. I told them, and I've told them from when they've been very, very little. I'll love you, but I will not love your behaviours. And if you use a behaviour that harms someone else, I will back the other person 100%, but I will still love you. And I have said that from quite a young age with the children. And my son now is expecting his first child, which is a little girl that will be born in October. And I feel that we broke the intergenerational trauma that was happening. Unfortunately for my brother, that is not so. His daughter nearly went through exactly the same situation as me. And she's now been, I think, about 7 years since she's had anything to do with my brother. So he did not escape that intergenerational trauma. It continued on. And my other brother, 3 divorces later, clearly really a really great guy, has probably been someone that just doesn't know how to build that relationship because it affected us all in different ways. So the importance of family, and that's just not mum and dad, that's everybody in the village, which is why I'm so passionate about the village. It takes a village. It doesn't have to be mum and dad. It could be a teacher. It could be a minister of religion. It could be anybody. It could even be a best friend that you're growing up with, but it makes a difference. I had at school, I did have that teacher who did believe me that the violence was really going on. I mean, I had some standoffs like you wouldn't believe with my father because I was strong enough to do that, but it come at the cost of quite a few bruises. But I would continue to do it. And I was believed, and to the point where even the school at one point would have taken me away from my family had I just said, yes, do that. These days, children don't have that enormous responsibility on their shoulders. The system will do that for them. Had I been taken away at that point, goodness only knows what would have ended up, but I probably would have learnt a few healthy boundaries that it took to my mid-30s to understand, and probably, to be honest, another decade before I could stand firm and believe in what I was saying when I stood up for myself. So to close out, as a result of all that, I'm now part of the Family and Domestic Violence Working Group, which reports into the government. There's 12 of us, and we're there for a 2-year tenure. And we look at everything that's sort of going across the table, whether it be legislative changes, reform plans, initiatives, and so forth. And there'll be certain areas that we're just working out, because it's only our second time that we've met this year, because we were only newly formed and started in January. To be able to give that lived experience back into all the reforms and also the initiatives, and are they actually hitting the mark? So we hear that there is legislative change coming. So I know in June there's going to be more legislative change coming around coercive control, and it's cleverly to hold lawyers to account. So if they are actively participating and supporting someone, there's now going to be ramifications to their legal practice, which is an area that many, many people will tell you that lawyers, or they'll say certain people are just chasing money. It's more that the system allows that style of practice, and the longer that you're in court, I guess the more that lawyers get paid, and that's the general sentiment, but it's much more complex than that, right? It's actually the systems, not so much the people. For them to be able to have that safety also, to be able to use legislation to stop representing some of the people that will keep people literally tied up for decades in court until the children have aged out of the court system. So with that, anyone that has any lived experience or they want to provide any feedback, I take that back to that group, and we all have that discussion and how that impacts moving forward. So I'm hopeful. There's lots of discussion going around. There is a lot of legislation that has been talked about in all the states, but it's still not enough. I mean, already this year we've had 14 women lose their lives to family and domestic violence, and 4 children. Last year we had 78 women, which is once every 4 days someone lost their life to family and domestic violence. And while it is a gendered violence, I do acknowledge that men are the victims. 96% of the time they are actually the perpetrator, unfortunately. And that has a bit to do with that imbalance of power and, I guess, the family structure and how we view it. Much more complex than that, of course, but it all does start with family, because we all start as small children learning what is acceptable behaviour and how to work through those feelings of anger, and how do we come to some place where it's okay not to always get your own way, which anyone that has a 2-year-old at home at the moment understands it's a very difficult task to teach. It takes time and years, and it's why someone's a child for 18 years. It's why it takes 25 years for the human brain to fully develop. It takes a long time to learn this skill set, and that's okay. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Wendy, for your powerful statement and sharing your story with us so articulately. And we're, I guess, very blessed to have someone like Wendy informing policy for our government. So thank you very much for all that you do and for sharing your story. So friends, now I can open the floor to questions if anyone's got any. We have a roaming microphone.
Has the increased awareness about these issues led to a decrease in domestic violence, or vice versa, or the levels are more or less the same? At least the reported and recorded cases.
Unfortunately, no, it hasn't. As I said, last year was the highest amount of people that lost their lives to family and domestic violence, and they're only one group that have been a part of the family and domestic violence, I suppose, trauma, if you like, over the years. But what we do now is know that we're now more informed. There is legislation, and a number of states are just testing out that legislation. It is still quite hard to prove coercive control, which is probably one of the leading styles of abuse that many people will endure, either within their family or actually at work as well. It's rife in the community, and that would go back to potentially the family and how our relationship with power. So unfortunately, no, but everywhere's working hard. The police are now got in-depth training that they didn't have. They do play acting now, so when they go to scenarios, they don't miss, or they have a higher chance of not getting the people mixed up and thinking the victim's the perpetrator and the perpetrator's the victim. So they're actually, last year, started doing role-playing as a part of their teachings, because it is extraordinarily difficult to, as a policeman, you can imagine rocking up and, to a situation that's highly volatile and then trying to make a judgment call on where it's all at. So I'd love to say yes, but no.
I wanted to ask a bit about the sort of the signs and red flags, particularly around coercive control. Something that stood out to me about your story, Wendy, was like those examples you gave, for example, around the slippers and kind of dismissing that as, oh, he was very tidy and I wasn't, And I guess, how can we help not just victims, but family and friends that are observing behaviour to more critically analyse signs and not be so accepting?
I had a very, very dear friend say to me that I changed my demure when he came into the room, and I become very submissive, whereas not like that when I was just with her. And I took that as a validation point post, but quite often coercive control is retrospect. It's once you've left the relationship, it becomes more and more visible to you, and then you start to have to unpack all the ways that you were controlled. So, I'll share a very intimate coercive control that I experienced was around sexual intimacy. I was forced to do and watch certain things, and I thought that was part of what a healthy relationship was, because I was just appeasing him. However, I have never had any desire to repeat those types of things, and I had a very unhealthy relationship with sexuality, and I realised that he had developed that in over a period of time, and that was probably the direct result of his addiction to porn and how he's seen women in an intimate space. And I allowed all sorts of things that degraded me. And to think about that now, that's, to start with, there was a lot of shame. So there's a lot of shame around coercive control. So if someone is apologising for the behaviours, or they just need to do better for their husband or their wife, it's their job to look after the children because he earns the money, or vice versa. It can be male or female with coercive control. There's a higher percentage of females in that space to, say, physical violence, where it's much higher with men. So it's just being there and listening and just asking maybe the question of, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? Because if someone had asked me that over and over again, I would have told them that it made me feel terrible, that I was always subjected to that. Or all of a sudden I was trying to do my master's, and for the love of money, he would love to move, usually after I'd paid for it, but before we'd completed. And like, we moved house every 12 months. And now looking back, I realised that was actually a great form of control, because I was always packing up the house, looking after the children, moving to the next house and so forth. And that wasn't through any financial reason to do that, but it's very subtle, but it's the imbalance of power. And if you feel that it's having a conversation, if they're always giving their power away, then there's something not quite right. And it's time. They may never leave the perpetrator, but having a great friend to listen to is the best thing that you can do. When you're having these conversations, be mindful that they have spent years and years potentially of other people providing them the best way to go, including their partner, who is the controlling person. Please don't give them all the things that they should be doing, because you're actually continuing to take their choice away from them. Validating them and supporting them in whatever choice they might make, even if you think, oh, that's not going to go well, that's their choice and their trajectory to learn through that. And as we know, we all learn through, not just when everything goes right, but when everything's going wrong as well. There's lessons in that. So empower them to just follow the decision they want, even if you don't think it's the right decision. It's not for you to say, and don't become a part of, because they'll be very open to it. They'll ask for it, in fact, because they're so used to someone telling them what to do, because that nearly feels safe for them to be told. But it's actually their journey, and it's just supporting them to show up in the bravest way they know how.
Thank you so much. I personally have learned so much, and I'm sure all of you have as well. A big thank you to the Baha'i community of Melville for hosting. A big thank you to our expert panelists who have educated us immensely today. And a thank you to our AV assistant at the back who has helped us with sound and audio recording. And also a thank you to the Mental Health Forum's organizing task force.
If today's episode has raised any concerns for you, please reach out to your local mental health service and your support network. For those in Australia, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. If you found today's episode useful, remember to share an episode with a friend and follow Mind and Soul Matters on your preferred podcast platform and on social media. Look forward to your company next time on Mind and Soul Matters.